To our guest for today, who's an old friend and one of the pillars of the institution, which we are all privileged to be a part of. To make a formal introduction to this special lecture on Does Learning Lead to Empowerment, I'd like to invite Ms. Manjula Menon.
Thank you, Jayashree. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. K. Balasubramanian. He is the Vice President of the Commonwealth of Learning, an intergovernmental organization. Prior to joining COLE, he's served as consultant in several international organizations, was Director of JRD Ecotechnology Center at MSSRF, and was also the Executive Director for the Society for Social Forestry Research and Development. His areas of specialization include participatory development, program planning and management, monitoring and evaluation, and ICT-enabled human resource development. After taking over as VP of COLE, he's contributed to the organization's reputation as being an innovative organization through designing and implementing the lifelong learning for farmers program. This program has won several international awards and has been rated as one of the most impactful development initiatives. Here today he will be talking about the three-dimensional framework for empowerment, which advocates an integration of human, social, and financial capital to bring about positive development outcomes. He'll be elaborating this through sharing the experience of the L3F program and his experience of implementing it in Uganda and Kenya. Over to you. And Professor Swaminathan will be presiding over the session. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jayashree and Manjula. Thanks a lot. You said it's an old friend, yes. It's a kind of an emotional return to foundation. It's been here since, I think I've been interacting with Dr. Swaminathan since 1986, when he started conceiving the idea of this foundation we had in Koturpuram. I used to interact with him, and I joined here in 1995. Whatever I learned, whatever stage I have been right now, it's all due to Swaminathan Foundation. I think it was one of the most exciting periods. I was earlier working with the Swedish International Development Authority, SIDA. And in 93, 94, I was getting 30,000 rupees per month as my salary, which was quite a big salary. And then one day, Dr. Swaminathan called me to Coimbatore. And we were all for a research council meeting. And then Dr. Swaminathan said, Bala, we are planning to set up another unit. And that time there was another evaluation. We had gone through an evaluation, SIDA evaluation 94. We had gone through we are planning to set up a new center. Would you like to come and take it up? So evening he asked me, would you like to take it up? Next day morning, take it up. And by afternoon he said, you are taking it up. And he said, look, I can't afford that kind of a salary which SIDA was paying 30,000 rupees. I will pay you 9,000 rupees, which is still a very big salary those days. But it was such an excitement, I didn't even blink. I just called my wife and said, Professor has offered me this job. She said, take it. If you're going to enjoy this, take it. I think we didn't regret the decision a bit. It was one of the most exciting careers. I see a lot of new faces. Some of my colleagues who were there with me, and most of my colleagues who were with me will definitely share. We kept on trying many things. We tried very innovative ideas. We burnt our fingers. We failed. But for us, failure is also a learning experience. And we could tell the governments, the farmers, the farming communities. And I was my background is sociology. I did my PhD in sociology, and I was working with Swedish International Development Authority for joint forest management. So when I came to foundation, Dr. Swaminathan offered me this JRD Tata Ecotechnology Center, where I had integrated pest management, part of microbiology, aquaculture, horticulture, agronomy, and sometimes I poke my nose even in molecular biology. I went and asked Professor, I said, how come I'm only a social scientist and how come you are putting me in place. I feel like Mowgli in Jungle Book. Professor said, look, the idea of the society is not to do research and publish papers. It is to translate research into development. Your job is to translate the research into field reality so that the communities, poorer sections, have a sustainable development process. And your job is to do that. And it was such an exciting affair. Since I was not in the discipline, I could afford to ask some stupid questions and in the respective disciplines, and I used to come out. But what a period it was. And even now I see most of the programs which we initiated still yielding very great results. And everything we learned was here, including this hall while it was being organized, everything. We learned civil engineering, we learned molecular biology, we learned transport, this thing, legal aspect, you name it, we learned here. It was such a great experience, and I think that's the experience still carries me, and my colleague Dr. Balaji was here, would have also told you. I think that still carries us, and thanks a lot, Professor. And Andy. I think probably the one person with whom I had the maximum fight when I was here. We used to have, I mean, it's not just a fight, it was a little fight. But she was a devil's advocate, and she provoked us, and we responded. In fact, we wanted to face her challenges, and we did many things. And I think that also paved a very, what you call a very strong sustainable development process in the village. And whatever we are doing right now in our present position also comes from those experiences. So we had those what you call strong dialogues and discourses. We are not confined to academic research, but we did hardcore research. But the research was converted into development process. Thanks a lot, ma'am. And Professor P.C. Kesavan. He was the first executive director of this foundation. I never knew he was another hardcore person from a nuclear atomic reactor. When I met him in Baba Atomic Research Center. And I think just like with Auntie, I have fought with him and he has fought with me. But everything led to certain developmental activities, new ideas, innovative practices. We started facing new challenges and we responded to the challenges. It was a great, and all my colleagues there who were sitting there, I could see those people. I think some of the youngsters here, you will probably after 5 to 10 years, you will realize what kind of wealth you have been able to acquire. And I think if I am a vice president of a intergovernmental organization, it's because of this foundation. Thanks a lot. And now I will talk to you about a program and the experience of one of our programs. And this led us to some of the important questions. The question was, does learning lead to empowerment? This was based on our programs in Kenya and Uganda. We also have programs in India, particularly in Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. We have collected the data and we have been working on it. And but right now we have a very clear analysis from Uganda and Kenya. I thought I'll share with you, and definitely will be also useful for Swaminathan Foundation, because education for sustainable development. Professor Swaminathan was one of the pioneers who said that the sustainable development is required. And one of the important aspects of sustainable development is empowerment. If you look into the new development goals, development goals of 4 and 5 talk about empowerment. So how do we look at empowerment? Can education and learning lead to empowerment? These are some of the questions which we thought about. And we started looking into the relationship between education and empowerment. It's a kind of an enigmatic relationship. In fact, if you look in terms of those what you call very provocative and very strong anti-education. I wouldn't call anti-education. People who question, who challenge education, like Paulo Freire, who said the formal education does not lead to empowerment. He said empowerment is much more than building skills and competences. And there was a very big school, particularly from Latin America, which challenged the theory that education and learning will lead to empowerment. Even from what he called the neo-functional, neoliberal, the new economics theories, even if you use those frameworks, studies have shown that there has not been much of a strong relationship between education and empowerment. Okay, let's look into the non-formal learning, what we call the agricultural extension, which is one of the key focus of Swaminathan Research Foundation. Unfortunately, the non-formal education also started following up the same pattern of the formal education. The term extension comes from Oxford and Cambridge in 19th century, when the professors in the Oxford and Cambridge, out of sheer guilt complex, evening after 4 o'clock used to go to the community and get involved in adult learning. And they used to call it as extension. And when the land-grant colleges in US were started for agriculture, they started saying that the professors have to teach the students till 2 o'clock, and after 2 o'clock they should go to the farmers and train them. And they called it as an extension. And we also followed the same terminology and we started calling it as an extension. In other words, we followed the same classroom type of training, didactic mode of capacity building was followed. It was a teacher-student, I know, you don't know, I will teach you, you will learn, and you'll become wealthier, stronger, much more brainier. It didn't work because we started focusing on what we call the conventional pedagogy. There is something called andragogy, which is for the adult learning. And recently people are talking about heutagogy, self-determined learning. Now those things are not taking place in agricultural extension because there is no self-determined learning. It's not being in a systematic way, it's being promoted. It's still the pedagogy which is promoted. It is training program, farmers field school, I will train. The same university systems we are following. So the non-formal learning also yet to show that kind of a difference in empowerment. But then there is a question. What is empowerment? There's a plethora of definitions, and then there's a confusion. But when we started looking at the empowerment, we found out the definition of Naila Kabir, which we thought was quite an interesting one and helped us a lot in developing our framework. She said, the expansion in people's ability to make strategic life choices in a context where the ability was previously denied to them. In other words, empowerment is always talked in terms vis-a-vis disempowerment. You are disempowered and then you move towards a process of an empowerment. So empowerment is about the process by which those who have been denied the ability to make strategic life choices acquire such an ability. Now, it is always seen in the context of resources, agencies, and achievements. But how do you measure? Okay, fantastic, Naila Kabir has said this, but how do you measure empowerment? How do you know somebody is empowered? Quite a difficult one, and as a sociologist and as a person who has been trained in social anthropology, I'm always allergic to very strong quantitative techniques, but then sometimes you also need the quantitative analysis in addition to qualitative analysis. And we were scanning the literature, and we found out that IFPRI, International Policy Research Institute, has done Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. And then there was, by the CARE International, you had the Women's Empowerment Matrix. So we went through all this empowerment measurement process, and we found out that we should develop, there are certain problems in those methodologies. And when you talk about empowerment, you're talking about empowerment of women alone. we thought we should talk about empowerment of men. I'll come to that later, why we should talk about empowerment of men. The reason is, there are studies in Tanzania and other things show, in other countries, African countries show, that because of disempowerment, the domestic violence is high. So the men need to be empowered so that they said that typical patriarchal structures and the stereotype notions of genders could be addressed. It is a very interesting study in Tanzania which was done in 2001, which talked about this. So we thought we should look at empowerment at these three levels. It's resources, it is access to and control of both material and human and social resources, agency, which is both formal and informal decision-making process in important and strategic areas, and achievements. Well, I may have resource, I may have the capacity to take a decision, but I may not be able to act upon it. So achievement talks about acting upon it. So we need to take all these three elements together to define empowerment. If you look at the IFPRI's model, IFPRI had taken the 5 domains of empowerment in their index, which is in terms of production, resources, income, leadership, and time. And they had indicators for this. We felt that this is a bit inadequate. We need to develop it further. There are different realms of empowerment we should look at when setting our objectives or measuring the impact. They are like this. It's starting from an individual level to household level to the enterprise to the community level. What we argued is that a person who is empowered at the community level need not be empowered at the household level. Empowerment can take place at different levels. Whereas the other index had taken a what you call a kind of a homogeneous approach. They thought empowerment is a uniform process. We said no, it can act in a different levels. So we started looking into this. So in other words, a person might be empowered in one realm and need not be in the other one. So we started looking into the choice of realms in our vis-a-vis one of our programs. We thought we should look at 3 realms: at the household level, at the enterprise level, and at the community level. We removed the individual level as well as at the global level. We thought that's too complex for us to address with our minimal resources in this study. And we also looked at these dimensions: psychological, social, economic, and political dimensions. And the most important is we also looked at the degrees. I may have a knowledge, but I may not have the means. So education can give you a knowledge, but if you don't have the means, the knowledge is not translated into action. So the means, then there is a desire. And that's where probably the institutions, the socio-cultural factors can actually, what you call, desensitize you to have a desire to move forward. So that desire also is required. That the last, based on all these things, you have to act upon it. So we felt the degrees also need to be addressed, and based on this, we developed these 3-dimensional models. It's a realm, the degree, the aspects. We started looking at the community level, enterprise level, the household level, and you could look at in terms of knowledge, desire, means, and actions, and with these aspects. Because this gives you a better picture than the unidimensional models of IFPRI and other organizations. In fact, only 8 months back we developed this model. And we tried to check this model in one of our programs called Lifelong Learning for Farmers program. When we developed this program is being implemented in 7 Commonwealth countries. Now there are about 15 Commonwealth countries that have shown interest to check that. We always felt that these 3 capitals are acting in isolation. This human capital, financial capital, biggest criticisms of, it's okay. No, I like talking like this. It's okay. Are you recording it? Okay, my voice will pick it up. One of the biggest challenges in agriculture
is that agriculture education is that it has a strong backward linkage, but it has a weak forward linkage. The same hall in 2001, Professor would remember, the chairman of State Bank of India, Mr. Pudwal, came here, and we made a presentation to him and said there is a need to employ a lot of agricultural graduates in the banking sector to promote agriculture in the villages and the districts, etc. Initially he smiled, he said no, the normal banking officials will be enough. And he said, why should I go into agriculture? Then we said agriculture is there's a strong segment there, and that time the globalization was coming in, and you need to capture a new market. Agriculture is a market, and you can play a role. You should not see it merely from a priority sector or a corporate social responsibility side. It's a business model. He said, no, I think we are happy with our system. Though he didn't say that bluntly, during the coffee, this thing in the lounge, he said, no, we are happy with this. Very next day, the Tatas who were borrowing huge amount of money from State Bank of India, Nariman branch, suddenly shifted to an international, another bank, a Korean bank or something like that, because by the time the globalization was a little bit liberalizing your access to finance outside India. I remember Mr. Pudwal and the State Bank of India officials came here, yes, we agree, we need to promote this. And they came out with this kind of what you call contracting the agricultural graduates at the district level for the banking sector. 5 years contracts, 3-year contracts. 2007, there was a review of it. I was invited by the bankers in Bombay. I thought they are going to praise me, and we had suggested this idea, so I went proudly to the Indian Bankers Association office and sat there, and all the bankers sat together, and they started blasting me left and right. He said it is very difficult to take an agricultural graduate to a village and train that graduate in finance, credit, market linkages. Whereas they found that it is easier to take a BCom graduate, train that person in agriculture, than an agriculture graduate in forward linkage. Fortunately, Mr. Katiyal, Professor Katiyal was the ICAR deputy chairman. He was also there. So we sat together and said, this needs to be addressed in the agriculture education. That showed that our conventional system focused only on these aspects, but not in this aspect. An Indian farmer, according to a National Planning Commission study, has hardly 3,500 rupees per hectare as a capital investment. 3,500 rupees per hectare of investment, if you take that average, the person has to produce, he or she has to produce food for the family as well as to create a surplus for the market. In Tanzania, it is $45 per hectare. When the financial capital is very, very limited, you give how much of human capital, it's not going to get translated. Okay. Then when we went and started talking to the bankers, then they said, look, why we are not going to the bankers, the farmers? Because they are not repaying it. There is a default and the transaction cost is very high. Then we said, if you have social capital, instead of talking to each farmer, if there are 500 farmers, 500 or 1,000 people come together, you transact business through the groups, then your transaction cost will come down. And human capital, we always thought that the experts teaching the farmer. But there is a very strong what you call horizontal learning which takes place in the farming. Thousands of years agriculture developed through horizontal learning. The university and research came only 150 years back. The rice, the wheat, the material, everything you eat comes from horizontal learning. And that comes from a strong social capital. You need to invest on the social capital. We said if you link all these three and use information technology to broaden the canvas of social capital, create a linkage between financial capital and then give a strong human capital, this will have a better development process. This will enable a better physical asset management and natural resource management, will lead to empowerment, which will lead to livelihood and security. And since it is a business model, the banks stand to gain, the ICT companies stand to gain, it becomes sustainable. We showed this model and we started testing it, and in an 8 years period, the National Institute of Bank Management Pune did a study. They found out, they did a social rate of return analysis. For every $1 we invested, the farming community got $9 worth of incomes and assets. And 100% repayment to the financial institutions, which earned the banks in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu as well as in Maharashtra, earned 8 times more income from L3F farmers. L3F is the lifelong learning for farmers. For the same product compared to the non-L3F farmers in the same region. And the cost of capacity building was 6 times lesser than the conventional training program. Similarly, the University of Nairobi conducted an evaluation in Kenya and Uganda, and they found out, man, look, Uganda and Kenya, having 2 meals a day is still a challenge. And this is the control group who are neither in our program nor in the any social capital group system. Only 20 to 25% have 2 meals a day. And most of them are HIV/AIDS affected. That's a situation. But when we introduced this program, we found out that this group, the number of people having 2 meals a day, the families having 2 meals a day also went up. So this was the, right now we reach more than 200,000 farmers, but the Commonwealth of Learning is not a funding organization. We give some small seed money. We always feel that minimum intervention, maximum impact scenario is very important. So we felt that if we show this model, the banks, the governments, and the ICT companies can take it up and scale it up. So this is also our, what you call exit strategy or a withdrawal strategy. How do they learn? They learn through the mobile phones. Again, what is happening is there's no point in giving a generic learning. This lady learns about goat rearing, which is, which synchronizes with her business cycle of this goat rearing. Similarly, these are all what you call the Batwas, insensitively called pygmies. They collect honey. So they learn in their own language. Very interesting, this particular forest is in the border of Rwanda and Uganda. You have to walk 28 to 30 kilometers to access to this community. So the Makerere University, and we decided to have the programs there. But then thrice I walked. It takes 2 days to walk and then 4 days to recover. We thought we should have a similar, different program. Then we found out a pastor who was using a mobile phone. He had given to, they live in small communities. He had given a mobile phone and a speaker. We were wondering how come they're picking up mobile phone in the forest. This is what you call guerrilla tourism forest. There's a very strong guerrilla tourism. And in guerrilla tourism areas, they don't allow a lot of people because of, they feel that there may be a virus infection and all. So hardly 10 or 20 families a day is allowed. So hence it's pretty expensive. Only rich people come there. In order to cater to the rich people, the mobile companies have erected towers inside the forest. So we felt that we should have the program. For power, we started using you rotate it for 5 minutes, you get 10 minutes talk time. And the speaker is using a battery, and they go through this training program. In Kenya and Uganda, 95% of our households are HIV/AIDS affected, female-headed households. We started targeting that group very specifically. Female-headed households, households with low land or marginal farmers, most of them will be landless laborers, HIV/AIDS affected households, and marginalized communities such as Batwa. So we targeted very specifically these groups. And after implementing this study after implementing this program for 4 to 5 years, we did an analysis. In Uganda, we compared a village which has our program with another village which does not have our program, but in the same socio-ecological, socio-cultural, socio-economic milieu. In Kenya, we compared it along 3 groups of households who are involved in the poultry farming, backyard poultry farming. What you call L3F, lifelong learning for farmers who have backyard poultry, association members but not in L3F, neither in L3F nor a member in associations. So 3 groups we compared. And we developed this empowerment index which ranges from 0 to 1, with 0 depicting least empowered or highly disempowered and 1 reflecting a highly empowered one. So we used a 7-point Likert item, an attitudinal questionnaire was developed, and we in fact requested external agencies to conduct the study. Very interesting results it gave. If you look at Uganda, the male always ranked higher than female in empowerment score. But if you look at this particular line, this belongs to the L3F, Lifelong Learning for Farmers group, and this belongs to the control group. We found out that the slope is less, number 1. But what was much more interesting was the female in L3F was more empowered than male in non-L3F. So probably over a period of time, if he keeps on having similar initiatives, similar social engineering, probably this could move further. Then we also looked in terms of the empowerment degrees and realms. Let me not go into all these statistical details. But what does this detail show? It shows the process of empowerment is not uniform at the household, community, and enterprise level. It showed, in fact, this time in Chogam, Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the first time in Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, there was a women's forum. The theme of the women's forum was economic empowerment of women. And I went and when I argued that economic empowerment need not be construed as a total empowerment, because a person who is economically empowered need not be empowered at the household level. Still will be facing the domestic violence, will be submissive. So the empowerment levels will be very high. And we also found out our program has not made much difference in terms of the desire and means at the community, at the household levels. In fact, we focused only at the enterprise level. We did not focus at the other levels. This was one of the lessons we learned, and we are looking at how to address this issue in the next phase of the program. When we looked into the data in Kenya, Kenya also showed more or less the same result. And Kenya, you could see this results, the slope is more or less the same. And this is the group who are in associations and self-help groups, etc. They are lower, but they are better than the third group, which is neither in association nor in L3F. And here also the female of L3F had a higher empowerment score compared to the male of these groups. We did some regression analysis, and it showed, we are a bit careful about this, but it showed that the education has not emerged as a significant factor in empowerment. Here education means from 1st grade to 10th grade, that's the level we are talking about. In the context of the communities which we are talking about, we found out the illiterates and semi-literates respond and react to these kind of programs, and the empowerment process is much stronger than the people who have gone through an education process. We also have a similar data in India. We are very worried about the data. We are cross-checking the data that shows education by itself will not lead to empowerment. We also found out Variables like age, family income, reproductive role, years of farming have not emerged as a significant one. We found that social capital by itself is not enough. I think that's the biggest danger countries like India is doing, is developing the self-help groups. Self-help groups and microfinance by itself will not lead to development unless you create a social capital. They talk about cognitive social capital and structured social capital. In fact, Professor Muhammad Yunus, 25 years back, when he started the program in Bangladesh, he talked about self-help group in the context of a cognitive social capital. And if you, without all those things, if you just introduce microfinance and credit, it will not work. Social capital had to become a social learning capital, and you have to link it with financial capital and the human capital. When you link that, then it becomes a determinant of empowerment. So if you think that when people join a social self-help group, they will become empowered, no. They have to access credit, they have to have the learning, there is a strong horizontal learning, the cognitive social capital will have to be there. When all those conditions are fulfilled, empowerment process may take place. In fact, when we did this study, we also found out IFAD had come out with similar conclusions. IFAD also said that while people are being empowered at the enterprise level, but they are still submissive at the household level. And this is the quote. Many efforts to support women's empowerment focus on strengthening women's economic opportunities and decision-making capacities in groups or organizations. However, the same women often remain disempowered at the household level. They lack a voice in determining household priorities and spending patterns and in addressing their own health care needs. In fact, off the record, I remember when 14 years back, the Vice President of Uganda was here. I think Professor Keshav will remember. The Vice President, a lady, she was here. She went to Pondicherry, came back here, met the present Chief Minister here. She went back to Uganda, and in an open meeting she cried. What is the point being a Vice President? I go back, my husband still beats me. Next day she was asked to resign. She's educated, brilliant, she is at the community level. Again, this is off the record. At the political level. Yes. So I think it is very important that empowerment should not be seen in a homogeneous way. Empowerment at different levels. I think that was a kind of a learning experience for us. We still do not know in our program how to address the household and the community level thing. In fact, there is a small group which is working on those areas. Based on this, we found our conclusion, which stunned many of our board members as well as the governments which are working with it. Education by itself is not learning. Learning is much more than education. And learning cannot be a sectoral activity. It needs to have a holistic approach. Learning linked to social and financial capital offers better potential for women empowerment at community at enterprise level, but not at the household level. Miles to go before converting women's economic empowerment into household empowerment. Men's empowerment may be required. The dominance of men cannot be equated to empowerment. The dominance comes, it's also, there's one group of social scientists say that dominance is one of the indicators of disempowerment. And programs and institutions such as banks, microfinance, financial literacy need to invest. I think one of the biggest challenges with the financial institutions is they don't invest on social capital. They invest very little on human capital. And they expect miracles to happen with their credit programs. Doesn't work. But we also felt empowerment is not a zero-sum game. It is possible everybody can be empowered. You can. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to this.
Wanted to thank Bala. Last 1 hour, 1.5 hours have been really stimulating and thought-provoking. It was not merely a seminar to give information. I think the distinction he has made from education, learning, and empowerment, each one of them we use it very commonly. Empowerment, for example, if you say woman farmers empowerment, they also mention about prerequisites sometimes, the social capital and so on. We found when I was drafting with Meena and others were drafting a bill for the empowerment of women farmers to be given Parliament. One of the very first basic requirement was land. If you could not, you're not a woman farmer, access to land or entitlement to land became the first one. So in relation to empowerment, there are many dimensions which you multidimensional mentioned. But those of you, I think many of you have not been here when Bala was also director of the Eco-Technology Center. One characteristic of him was, as he said, when he joined social scientist, he asked me to do hard science. But he not only proved to be a wonderful director, but a great stimulator. He used to take his associates on a retreat every year. And I have talked to many of them who have come from retreat. They are transformed people. They're completely transformed. And he has got that kind of charisma and ability to transform not only himself, but also others. I have known him now from early 1990 onwards when he was working on the social forestry project. The social forestry society was really built by him. It was a remarkable job which he has done. So whichever one he has taken, our loss is universal gain, the Uganda's gain, or the Kenya's gain. We want to thank you, Bala, for giving your time. Whenever you come over, and because I think we need interaction of this kind. Ultimately, unless he has now a global experience of different cultural experience, and that will be very helpful in terms of, otherwise we oversimplify matters. We take it for granted. Education will lead to empowerment. Of course, education is a basic requirement. It doesn't, today's papers say the Human Development Report of UNDP again keeps us at 130th position out of 180. In spite of all of our universities, I think we have got so many universities, so many educational institutions, every one of them, but still our grading in the Human Development Report is really shameful, it's very low. We're not asking ourselves why is it so. Every year, this year they say we have gone up by 5 steps. From 135 we have come to 130 out of 180. That is nothing very creditable. So I think, Bala, thank you for coming. Please do start coming again and again, stimulating experience. Please join me in giving him a very big hand to Bala. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
No, please. On behalf of the foundation, it is a great pleasure to thank Dr. Bala. As Professor said, and of course we always will draw our inspiration and our thoughts from Professor's words. Stimulating and thought-provoking were really 2 words that stood out for this entire, the refreshing session that we've had. And when Dr. Bala's, the abstract first came in, I had a certain train of thought in my mind thinking that this is what it's going to be like. And, it's been so completely different, and it's like been so completely, so many different things have been discussed through this very, very crisp but so well thought out presentation. That thank you very much, sir. And as Professor says, it will be very stimulating for us to keep having these kind of sessions. Thank you to Professor for finding the time in between travel schedules last week and coming up this week, sir, to be with us on this occasion. And thank you all for being a great audience. Thank you.